Hi everyone, welcome to the Performance Cafe, and specifically welcome to today's edition where we are talking to Andy Golding, and she's going to be sharing coffee, biscuits and learnings with us as we do every Friday and talk about human performance and organizations. I absolutely adore Andy because her mantra is work shouldn't suck, and she's built her career around helping companies become places to which the best people want to come and stay and choose to stay. She's also the co-founder of Relevance Advisory, Still Human, and is the co-author of We Are Still Human and Work Shouldn't Suck. Andy has written for and contributed to publications such as The Financial Mail and Delivering Happiness. She also speaks on stage all over about company culture, employee experience, and building more human organizations in a world gone digital crazy. She was named one of South Africa's top 50 businesswomen to watch in 2018 by Entrepreneur magazine. I am so pleased to welcome her today. Andy, welcome. It's lovely to have you here. Very excited to be speaking to you about why work shouldn't suck. Do you maybe want to tell us a bit more about this and how you got here?
Thanks so much for having me. So work shouldn't suck. It comes from the place, so how I became an employee experience specialist is because my first job sucked. It was a job that I had taken straight out of matric to pay for my matric back. And I couldn't reconcile that for the last 12 years. I'd been working really hard to get good grades, to get a good final mark, to get into a good university, to get a good degree, to then get a job that I would hate going to every single day. And I really couldn't reconcile that. I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, my boss was awful. She was dictatorial. She was mean. And it was a terrible experience. I hated that I had to get out of bed every day. And I really do believe that life is way too short to resent the reason that you have to get out of bed every morning. And that planted a seed for me that there's got to be a better way. If I'm having a terrible experience going to work every day, how many other people are having that experience? And how is it impacting their delivery? Because it was impacting my delivery. I was having a bad experience. I was doing the bare minimum. I was leaving as early as I possibly could, avoiding doing a lot because of the experience I was having. So, and I realized that there must be a lot of people doing that, a lot of people in a similar position, and there had to be a better way.
So excellent point that you start from. I think there are too many people that really feel that way, at work, and it's such a loss given the amount of time we spend at, in our offices and at work. So my next question to you then is, help me understand: is employee engagement and employee experience the same thing? What's the deal there?
So they're not the same thing, but they're often confused, and they're often terms used interchangeably, incorrectly so. So if you think about three circles, so your innermost circle is your company culture. Then you have a middle circle, and then the outermost circle. That is the level of engagement. So you've got your culture, the way we do things around here, and then engagement. The thing that creates whether people are engaged or not is the employee experience. The experience that people have creates whether or not they're engaged. It's the same as if you have a terrible experience in a restaurant. You have a bad experience, you disengage. You have a bad experience in a relationship with somebody, you disengage from that relationship. So employee experience is actually the missing link between culture and engagement. Oftentimes, employee engagement, it's a moment by moment thing. It's an adrenaline shot. So we do these big fancy offsite events, but what about the day-to-day tiny little things about the employee's experience in the workplace? When they log in, does their computer allow them to log in? Is their computer fast? Is it able? Do they have the right connectivity? Do they have the right information to do their work? Are they being recognized for the work that they do? So employee experience, essentially, it's the sum of everything in the work environment that creates how employees are made to feel, and whether they're being switched on and grown or switched off and depleted. And employee engagement is what results from that experience.
Okay. So how does if we take a look at the difference between employee engagement and employee experience, if someone says they're an employee engagement consultant, are they doing something different to you?
never been an employee engagement consultant, so I wouldn't actually know. But I think too often the lens on employee engagement is one-stop, like adrenaline hits. Like these big events that like drive everybody gets like all riled up and excited for a day, but nothing changes when you go back to the office. From an employee experience perspective, you're looking at every single thing, the sum of everything in the work environment. So everything from how are people led, how are they communicated with, how are they given information, what does ownership and accountability look like, how do we innovate, what is the space, the physical workspace, which is a really interesting question in 2020 of what does workspace look like. What are our ways of working? What are the rules, the systems, the tools, the processes that we have in place? That are they enabling people or are they disabling people? So looking at employee experience is a massive spectrum.
So help us understand, why is employee experience, why is it important for business? So I'll give you a bit of context to that question. I work in a similar field to yours. And so it's so easy for managers to say, what's in it for the business? I get they're going to be happy, but why should I want them to be happy? And I think the basic bottom line is this going to affect profitability?
Yes, it is going to affect profitability. But I mean, as a leader, if you're asking the question of why should I bother investing in this, think about how much of your bottom line is going towards paying salaries. How much are you paying in salaries every month? Why would you want to be paying that, but only getting 10, 15, 20% of that person's capability? Why would you not try and unlock exponential value from the same number of people that you currently have? And that's what getting employee experience right does. And I mean, on top of that, there's the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends, and they talk to employee experience, and they say that the companies that get this the most right, companies that get employee experience right, have double the innovation, double the customer satisfaction, and 25% higher profits. Now, what would any of us not do for 25% higher profits, double the innovation, and double the customer satisfaction? And that comes from investing inwards, investing in your people, and making sure that people are being switched on and grown and not switched off and depleted.
Wonderful. At this point, I'd like to ask you about a concept that when I was researching for our discussion today, you speak of headspace and heart space. And is this what we're leveraging in order to get that profitability?
Absolutely. It's in the world of work that we're in today, we were not relying on a person to come in and move this widget from point A to point B. We're relying on people to come in with best thinking. We need access to people's best thinking. We need access to their highest levels of contribution. We need their discretionary effort. And people who are switched off and depleted give none of that. People who are switched on and grown give that. We get access to their thinking, their ideas, because everybody, why would you hire somebody if you didn't think that they were exceedingly smart and able to add massive value to your business? You went on a deep mission to find a brilliant human being to hire. You want access to that headspace of theirs. You want access to that innate brilliance of theirs. And the heart space thing is, people need to feel cared for. We're human beings. We crave, we create, and we respond to human experiences. So that's where the heart space comes in. I might be able to do great thinking work, but if I'm treated terribly and I don't feel like my company cares about me at all, I'm going to disengage. And so that's why we need that headspace and that heart space that's switched on and grown.
Okay. And then I'm assuming that if we talk about headspace and heart space and the fact that it's not just about widgets anymore and getting the best and make the best of everyone's potential, my question is, does that mean that the role of trust in organizations is so much more important?
Critical. The role of trust is critical. So we work with a model of 12 critical components for designing experience. And the thing that holds that model together is what we call the force field, or the container of trust. If there is no trust, everything else falls apart. We define trust as we are safe to think, express, experiment, make mistakes, learn and grow, and we always have each other's backs. Now, if people feel trusted, they will try new things. They'll step out. They'll bring great ideas to the table. But if people are living in watch my back mode, then all they do is the bare minimum because they play it safe. And I think that a big question that everybody, every leader and every manager and anybody actually who deals with people on a daily basis, which is most of us, you need to ask yourself, what are your trust default settings? Do you default to trust, or do you default to distrust? Do you default to thinking that people are willing, are capable, and are able to do great work without being constantly watched and looked over? Or do you default to thinking that people need to be constantly watched, they need to be managed, they're not going to do it by themselves? Because that trust default, if you default to trust or default to distrust, it influences your actions. It influences the way you respond to people. It influences the experience that you create for people. So in an organization, there has to be trust. People need to feel safe. They need to feel that psychological safety, like my leader has my back. But there also needs to be trust from the organization and its people. Trust that people will show up, will work in the organization's best interests, will do great work. And the organization also needs to give people freedom to flex those muscles without constantly micromanaging them, watching over their shoulders, and giving them, hemming them in, keeping them in a tight lane when you're looking for magic from people.
So I love that. And I agree with you entirely. And almost what I'm hearing is, you spoke earlier about the connection between organizational culture and employee experience. Does that mean that trust therefore becomes one of those key organizational values? And how do we make that happen? Because trust is sort of earned. So how do we help companies? And I'll give you the context of this. I was in a meeting with a client yesterday, and he said to me, "I'm basically a dinosaur. I didn't know that people could work from home on their own." And he said it, and he said, "So now they're working from home, but now what? So how do we help them build that trust?"
Trust building it's a big task. It's a big undertaking, but it's massively meaningful. And employee experience is made and broken in millions of tiny moments. And those are the moments where trust is made or broken. How are you reacting when somebody makes a mistake? The wheels come off on a project. Are they berated, thrown under the bus, ridiculed? Or are you dealing with it? I'm not for a second saying people don't need to take ownership and accountability. Hold people to account, but also have their backs. Fix it as a team. Like, do you go into blame mode or do you go into fix it mode? And then deconstruct the learnings, have the conversation about what went wrong and how you can avoid it happening. But trust is in those tiny moments. Do you have your people's backs? Do your people feel like you have their backs? Something that's infuriating me at the moment is a lot of our big corporates have been through massive rounds of layoffs at the over 2020, understandably, because COVID has caused chaos. But now suddenly that we're coming to the end of the year and travel's opened up again, now we're seeing a lot of exco offsites starting to happen. And these are exco offsites happening in expensive places, massive overheads. You've got lots of costs that are incurring. So suddenly we're saying we have to lay off hundreds of thousands of people in many cases that no longer have jobs, but we're okay for the exco to go on an offsite. And what message does that send to people? How are people supposed to trust that you have their best interests at heart if you've shown that when times get tough, we will let people go, but as soon as times get better, the exco will treat themselves? And it's very much going to come from a place of leadership. Like, leaders need to own this. Leaders, and that's if you're a leader of people, a leader of a business, or just a leader of a small group of colleagues, It's those tiny moments. Like, do people feel like you have their backs? Are people in, your work environment, is it one that's structured around contribution from people, or is it one that's structured around controlling people? And so in every single moment of experience, are you building trust or are you breaking trust? And I think that's the good way to think about it, because there can be no trust building program that we put in place. It has to be in our day-to-day, moment by moment interactions with people and the way we conduct ourselves in every given moment.
Awesome. So you're saying that trust is critical. You also earlier referred about switching people on and switching people off. What does this mean for the quality and the training of leadership teams in order to make this happen?
Well, potentially controversially, my personal feeling is that no human being should be allowed into a position of leadership without adequate training. And I say that with the utmost compassion, because I do believe that we set leaders up for failure the vast majority of the time. I really do think that we don't give leaders the skills, the mindsets, the tools to lead people properly. People are either being switched on and grown or switched off and depleted. And too often, leaders don't know what needs to happen. They don't know what they need to do differently to create a great experience for people, to create that they're accessing people at their highest levels of contribution. So I think that we need to help leaders and managers by training them in leadership skills, training them on leading for employee experience, because it's a very rare narcissistic sociopath who shows up at work every single day wanting to create a bad experience for other people. It's a very rare person. Most of the time when that's happening, it's happening because people aren't aware that they're doing it. And so often when we run our leadership training, leaders sit there going, oh, my word, I can't believe I've been doing this for the last 5 years. I didn't know any better.
I agree there with you. Do you think that it's a bit of a legacy of the ideal corporate job? The reason I ask you this is because I've been through that exact process where I got demoted for being too hard on a team. And yes, it is my personality and I'm very driven and I own that. But at the same time, you're raised in corporate and the bar gets set and empathy is not really appreciated, and the results, the financial results are appreciated, and so it does sort of set one up on that course. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that it's no surprise, and it's not new that our traditional corporate model wasn't working. I mean, the whole traditional business model wasn't working. If it was working, the World Health Organization wouldn't have had to declare burnout as a workplace condition in, I think it was 2018 or 2019. If our world of work worked, we wouldn't be so sick as a human populace. But, and that's, I can imagine that when you were in that position of leadership, you probably also weren't having the best time because you're doing what you only know how to do, but your team's not responding. You're not getting the results. You're getting pushback from people. You're also getting pushed down on from those at the top. You're getting, so you're getting a lot of flack because your team's not delivering. So you as the leader are also having a bad, stressful experience. So yeah, but you can only lead and work from what you know. We can't do things that we don't know. Then that's why I think leadership training is critical, because what I think a lot of companies haven't done is they haven't taken a step back and said, what does rock star leadership in this business look like? How do we want our leaders to lead? What experience do we want our leaders to be creating for their teams? I think it's a very rare organization that specifically articulated all of those things and then made sure that their leaders get trained accordingly and get held accountable accordingly. So yeah, the traditional corporate model is certainly not helping, because you only know what you know and you're not being set up for success in your role.
And do you think that there's enough understanding or enough openness, shall we call it, from businesses now to say employee experience, and in essence, I don't know if this is the, sort of PC to say, but in essence, a happy employee is actually beneficial to your business. Do you think they're hearing that message?
Yes, I do think that that message is being heard more and more. And I mean, having been in the employee experience space for about 6 years now, 6 years ago, beating on this drum, companies were looking at us like we were lunatics, like complete lunatics. Like they were like, where did you crawl out from? But now the employee experience has become a recognized business discipline. It's become, companies have started to recognize, just as the stats have started to come out, like the Deloitte stats, there's brilliant stats from Globoforce and IBM. There's more and more the business case of why it actually makes a lot of sense for companies to focus on employee experience has come out. But also what companies have realized is that they need discretionary effort from people. They need the best thinking from people. Google didn't become the way that it did because it had two genius founders. Google became the way that it did because its two genius founders were genius at unlocking other people's thinking and contribution. That's where some of their biggest innovations came from. 20% time that Google had didn't unlock people's best thinking. They created an environment where people were safe and free to do that, and that they wanted to. So it's companies have to start to create these environments where people want to give their best thinking, give their best ideas, and more they're starting to realize that you do this by creating an exceptional employee experience for people. You do that by making sure people are being switched on and grown and not switched off and depleted. So and as the world, I mean, our world of work has been turned upside down in 2020. Companies are now starting to go, well, how do we build culture? How do we lead? How do we do all of this stuff remotely and keep people engaged? And as hard as 2020 has been, I think one of the biggest wins, one of the most amazing things to come out of this year is the deep humanness. We have all had to really come to grips and face our humanness. We've all taken a bit of a psychological beating this year. And whether it's me, it's my manager, it's my manager's manager, we've all faced this on different levels, but as human beings. And as companies, we've started to really connect human to human more. And I think that's the magic. That's something really powerful that's come out of this year, is we've acknowledged, we've come face to face with our humanness. And let's not lose that. Let's keep that. Let's keep a lens on that going forward.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about as well, because it's so interesting that you bring that up, because for 14 years, I worked globally remotely. I never met any one of my clients face to face ever. And I remember that one day we had Hardie-Daws, which is, for those of you watching from outside South Africa, a very big bird that makes a lot of noise. And in the middle of our meeting with our American counterparts, these birds started making a noise. And I remember the manager in my office jumping up to go and chase them away, because heaven forbid the sound of an animal should come across this line. And now we've sort of gotten used to, while we were talking now, my dog actually pushed open my office door and walked in and came and sat next to me with his face of, where are my treats? Luckily we didn't see him on the video. He didn't jump onto the desk, thank heavens. But we've gotten used to that. And I wanted to ask you, in your intro as well, we talk about the company's name is still human, and you say the world's gone digital crazy. What's happening around there for us, and how should we be looking at this forced digital craziness thanks to COVID?
Well, the world has been going more digital crazy for, more and more digital crazy for the last few years. But no matter how digital crazy the world goes, we're still human beings. And like I said just now, as human beings, we crave, we create, and we respond to human experiences. And I mean, I love the what you just shared, that your dog pushed open the door and came and sat. I was doing a webinar the other day, which was for a whole bunch of people in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and the host of the webinar has a preschool aged kid. and he came running into the room and said, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And these things happen. Like, welcome to working from home. And something that I've seen happen this year is, previously, and I say this with the most respect possible, but previously I really didn't have to care what your home situation was, whether you had childcare, whether you had pets, whether you lived alone, whether you lived with your parents. That really was unimportant to me previously. But what's had to happen now in teams is I've had to start to learn, what does your home reality look like? Do you have a young child who actually needs to be supervised? Like, do you have a baby or a toddler? Because a lot of parents have had to do like a 2-hour split. Mom takes baby for 2 hours, dad takes baby for 2 hours, kind of thing. And that means that I have to ask you, as my colleague, say, well, when is the best time for you to have this meeting? When suits you best? Because if I try and schedule it in a time when you're trying to look after the kids or trying to get them to do their Zoom homework, you're not going to be fully focused. You're not going to be present. You're not going to be able to do that. So yes, the world has gone digital crazy. Yes, all of our contexts, every context in our lives has collapsed to right here to the screen. But we're still humans. We still have this 3-dimensional life that we're living and that we all have to be aware of and paying attention to in everything that we do.
So, an interesting one, after living for so long on Zoom, which was my day-to-day reality, I didn't have anyone else in the office with me. So my only companion was whoever's, on the screen with me. What does this mean for our connection? Because this is now totally a self-interest kind of question, but we as South Africans, we love visiting and we love being around people and we love being in the room with people. And now we're trying to make connections over Zoom. What does this mean? Is there really a difference, or is it just strange because we're just not used to it?
I think from a personal level, I think that there really is a difference. I mean, not even really as a joke, even though it's funny. I genuinely forgot at a stage that everybody in my team exists from here down. Like, I saw one of our co-facilitators. We actually met up for a face-to-face coffee the other day, and I said, "Oh, you have legs." Who would have thunk? Because for the last 6 months, I've seen none of her other than from here up. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation actually with my aunt who runs a business in Australia, and she was saying to me that her concern is that their silos in their business are getting more and more deeply entrenched because their team is closer than ever, but they have nothing to do with anybody else in the business. And there's some amazing software that's been developed to really help create those human moments and those human connections. There's something called Donut, D-O-N-U-T, that runs in Slack. And it creates random coffee dates, random lunches where you can connect with people. They can give you thought prompts, conversation starters. And another one is something called Tribali, which is a French platform. It was developed by some guys in France. It's Tribale. And that you basically put people into the system. It sends them an email and says, would you like to be a part of a coffee or lunch date on X date? And you say, yes, I'm keen, I've got the time. It blocks your calendar. And then just before, I think 24 hours before, it populates that invite with 4 random people, 4 people who you may never have met with, connected with, or spoken to from across the organization. And it creates such meaningful moments of that human interaction where you would have had that we bump into each other in the lunchroom or we bump into each other in the lift, kind of unintentional collision is actually what they're called. What these software platforms start to do is make it easier to have those unintentional collisions now in a digital world. And also you meet people from across the organization, people who you may never have met before. But what that means is now if you and I are in a random coffee and we meet for the first time and you're in operations and I'm in finance and I have an issue and I need to speak to somebody in operations, I don't have to delay because I don't really feel like just having to reach out to some random person and hope that they help me, because we avoid that kind of thing as human beings. Rather, I can come straight to you and say, we had that coffee together. I remember you work in the operations department. Can I just ask you something? You can also share with me what's going on in the department, what's going on in your world. So suddenly I start to have a big picture of what's happening in the whole organization. I'm not just stuck in my team's lane or tunnel, really.
And that is invaluable. I was in a meeting yesterday, and two of the gentlemen, oddly enough, in the conversation were going off about cooking, and they both love cooking. And they have the torches, and they have special thises, and they have special. It was all above my head. Me, I make sandwiches. That's my forte. Darn good sandwich. But anyway, and it was interesting that when the meeting started, you could feel that they were more bonded than anyone else around the table because of cooking. And that's sort of some of the glue, I think, that we start missing.
Totally. And it's those little moments, those things like what connects us as human beings? What do we have in common? Because there was actually a fascinating study that was published in the American Journal of Personality and Social Psychology last year, 2019. And they looked at 86,000 people from across the world. They asked them, that were people of different genders, ages, nationalities, religions, etc. And they asked them questions questions to gauge their values in 22 different social categories. And they found that these people from all over the world are 93.3% the same in the values, the things that matter to them. So we are actually all more alike than we are different. How do we find those things in which we're alike? And those bond us. We bond over those commonalities, and it's important.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So we've had what I think is a lovely discussion around employee experience, organizational culture. How do we instill this in a business, and how does business value employee experience and what it can give to them? But I know you've also spoken about sustainability, and that it's important for employees as well. So this is not just in corporate interest, but in the interest of employees as well. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we talk about building sustainable performance in organizations. It's still human. That's what we strive to create, that organizations create sustainable performance. And sustainable in terms of business performance, actually the bottom line, business is able to keep going up, 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 but at the same time that the employees, their wellness, their well-being, their enjoyment, their experience is also going up, 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 up for this prolonged sustainability. We can't sustain business performance if we've got people falling off the wagon with burnout, disengagement, having a bad experience, being switched off and depleted. So they actually need to work together. A business can grow at the expense of its people only to a point, because at some point people start to fall out, people start to fall out the bus, fall off the wagon, and then you need to start replacing those people. And it takes time to replace people and for people to come in and start being productive. So if we want to create sustainable performance, we have to create that performance is sustaining with the experience that people are having, because profits, shares, and dividends are created by parents, sons, and daughters. All of the value that a company is able to bring to the world comes from the commitment, the efforts, and the dedication of those parents, those sons, and the daughters. And those are the same people who are constantly being either switched on and grown or switched off and depleted in the work environment.
So then, even for me as an employee, it is important to participate in this, because I think very often we get to sort of this maybe distrust because of the nature of employment, to date at least, that people sort of feel, the company might be doing this, but they're doing this to make more money. They're not really doing it for me as the employee. They're not doing it for my development. They're not doing it for me as employee. They're just doing it to make more money. Have you come across that?
Yeah, and I think that's a communication glitch. And I think it comes down to trust. Where my mind goes with that is trust. Does the employee trust the company? Does the employee feel like the company has their best interests at heart? And I think so often employees are quite wounded by previous experience that it's easy that then the employee, are you as an individual defaulting to trust, or are you defaulting to distrust? And that's,
Yes.
I think, a good question, because what the company is trying to do, take it from whence it comes. It's, if it benefits you, if everybody wins, because Google didn't create amazing office spaces and food nowhere more than 2 minutes walk away for their, like, not for their benefit. They did it incredibly strategically. They wanted people to love being at work, to stay there as long as they could, to be able to have good nutrition so that they could do good thinking, then their brains weren't being shut down by junk food. So a company has a business objective to meet. They have goals, they have targets, they have things that they want to achieve. But if there's nothing wrong with achieving that, so long as they're bringing their people along the journey, not killing people and destroying people along the way, because that's what employee experience should be: a mutually beneficial relationship. Business is benefiting, the human beings are having a great time, everybody's better for it. It should be a thing of mutual thriving, not the company needs to win and the employee must suffer. Why would we not try and create that everybody wins?
Indeed. And I think one of the oldest sort of standards where we see this, and it's something that is personally a great pet peeve of mine, is when we manage for tasks and time, bums in seats rather than outcomes and results. And one of the biggest learnings I've gotten from you, and there are many over the past 6 years, but one of the big things that I've learned from you in this week was when you spoke about, and I forget the name of the book and the author, where you spoke about activity versus action, where it's one thing busy, but it's another thing to actually have a result. Do you want to talk us through that a bit? Because I've just fudged it entirely. Would you like to tell everyone what I'm talking about and how you see that?
Sure. So that's actually from James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. And he talks about the distinction between motion and action. And so often we confuse being in action for actually being in motion. We think we're in action, but we're in motion. And the examples that he gives, he says, motion, talking to a personal trainer; action, doing 10 squats; motion, researching your book topic and some writing tips; action, writing 10 sentences. And so often we shy away from being in action because we think action is hard. It's going to involve massive investments of time, of effort, of energy, big sweeping changes. But in the context of employee experience, it's so easy to forget that employee experience is made in millions of tiny moments. Just 10 squats, just 10 sentences, just thank you to the person who's really put in the hard yards and the hard effort. And we actually talk about wasabi changes. Excuse me, where how when you eat sushi, you only need a tiny amount of wasabi and it really changes the taste of your dish. It's the same with changing experience. Oftentimes it's the tiny little things, those tiny little moments. If we can just tweak one or two of them, then we can make really meaningful change. And so it's easy to tell ourselves a great story of how we're doing something meaningful when we're just in motion. But are you doing the squats? Are you doing the push-ups? Are you writing the 10 sentences? It's a great analogy. Like, after when you're done, if you say, I'm going to do this now, are you going to be fitter for it, or are you going to have a better plan? Because if you're going to just have a better plan, you're in motion. If you're going to be fitter, better, stronger for it, then you're in action. Writing your training plan and speaking to a personal trainer is really not going to help you get your beach body ready. It's the squats, the planks, the burpees, and the sit-ups that are going to get you there. So, and that's a litmus that I love using, is when I come out of doing whatever this thing is that I've put in front of myself, when I come out of it, am I going to be better for it? Am I going to be fitter, stronger for it? Or will I just have a better plan? And motion steps are important, but motion steps are important because they precede action. Don't stop at motion, move to action.
And I think something that I've seen is that sometimes people use motion just to stay busy so that the boss can see I'm doing something. And that's, I think, so irritating, because then you might have someone whose bum is in the seat, but you're actually not getting the action. You're just getting, well, I'm going to look busy until 5 o'clock and then I'm out of here.
That's so often the case. And it's a conversation that I was having earlier today, because somebody sent me a message saying, I think that people are working less at home and so many people are just slacking off. And I said, no, I disagree with that. Actually, the research shows that people are working much harder at home, but there will always be people who game the system. There will always be people who are slackers, but it's likely only a small percentage. In fact, it's almost certainly only a small percentage. And then the question is, well, are people being held to account? Because yes, as a leader, as a business, do we make it okay for people to slack off, or do we tolerate it? And there's a brilliant quote by Jocko Willink, who's an ex-Navy SEAL. He says, leadership is not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. And tolerating bad behavior, tolerating slacking off, tolerating people not pulling their weight, that's you leading. That's you making it okay if you're letting people get away with it. And there's nothing wrong with having radically candid and courageous conversations. Conversations with people where we're all adults. You hired an adult, you are an adult, so let's do this as adults, but also as humans. There's no need to be rude. There's no need to be nasty. There's no need to be berating people. But you also do need to make people aware that they have a commitment and they need to honor that commitment, and there must be consequences for people not honoring that commitment. There's laws and there's rules for a reason, because we need constructs by which we run our businesses, by which we run our countries, and we need to hold people accountable to them.
I love what you say there, and I do love that you reference radical candor. I'm assuming you're talking about the work of Kim Scott. And I do enjoy her work, and I agree with you. I think we somehow have in organizations this concept of power, and managers are powerful, except when it comes to holding anyone accountable. Then it's easier just to get them out of the company than actually work with them on improving accountability.
Well, that comes directly back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, have our leaders and managers been trained? Are our leaders and managers equipped with the skills to have those hard conversations? Are they? The reason most people just tolerate bad behavior is because they have no idea what to do with it. They don't know how to have those hard conversations, and it's a critical muscle that needs to be built in every leader. And I mean, you talk about Kim Scott, and I love her book. I can see her book on my bookshelf if I just look over there. And for anybody not familiar with the model of radical candor, she says that in your communication, you need to care personally and challenge directly. And for me, the reason that I love that is because that care personally, we're human beings. You're a human, I'm a human. We're all facing up to our human realities. We've all got stuff going on in our worlds, and that's caring personally about the human being. But challenging directly is not being afraid to say, listen, you made a commitment. You made a commitment to do a piece of work, get something done by a certain time, meet a certain standard. You haven't done that. So what's going on? What's gotten in the way? What's caused that you haven't been able to deliver? You haven't met your deadline, your deliverable, you've delivered subpar work. And that balance between caring personally and challenging directly is so important. And I think for me, it's a brilliant litmus if I need to have a hard conversation with somebody. Because I can bring myself back to, in this moment, am I showing compassion for the human being, but also not skirting around the issue and actually tackling it head on?
Definitely. Andy, thanks so much. Everything has been so wonderful. I could probably keep you here for another couple of hours, but I fear then you might run out of ideas. entirely, and I'd have to start paying you royalties. But I think for me, the important thing is, what do we do? How can you help us get this message out there? Are there any initiatives where, if I'm not aligned to a corporate, for example, but I'd like to learn more, how do I do this?
Sure. So there's a lot. At Still Human, we actually have 5 lanes of focus. So we run assessments. So we assess and audit employee experience. We run a lot of education. So we have training that's available live in the room when and if that's allowed. It's available live online. And we also have an employee experience academy that we're developing. And in that academy there's 3 streams. The first stream is the fundamentals, employee experience fundamentals. What is it? Why is it important? What should we be thinking about? Because it's a pretty new business discipline that a lot of people are unsure about. They don't know much about. So that's stream 1 of the academy. And stream 2 is leading for experience. Stream 2 is specifically aimed at leaders, people who want to be in positions of leadership. Say, how do you lead to create that people are being switched on and grown by you and not switched off and depleted by you? And the third stream is actually our employee experience orchestrator training, because something that we're seeing more and more of, companies are hiring somebody into the role of employee experience manager or employee experience orchestrator. And what does that actually mean? What does somebody, what is the role? What are the skills? What are the things? What are the tools? And so the third stream of our academy is training on employee experience orchestration. And we also do all of the, so the academy, I think, is a great place to focus, just in terms of, very quickly, the other 3 lanes of the business. So we've got the assessments that we do. There's a lot of education work that we do. We then do a lot of design work, designing culture, designing employee experience strategies, induction programs, recognition programs, etc. We do a lot of consultation work in the employee experience space, should that be required. And we do recruitment, which is where we help companies recruit, train, and place employee experience orchestrators, specifically employee experience orchestrators.
Wonderful. That'll help, as you say. Otherwise, people just assume what this is and where it needs to go. So I know that something you've not mentioned yet, and it's only because I've also noticed there behind you those beautiful images on the background that you have. Do you want to tell us about those images?
Sure. These images come from our book. Our book by my co-author and business partner, Brad Shawkend. We wrote the book called We Are Still Human and Work Shouldn't Suck. And it's a book about how to build relevant businesses and exceptional work experiences for human beings in a world gone digital crazy. And when the book came out late 2018, we could never have predicted the poignance of that message just 2 years later.
Indeed. So that is also a must-have for the bookshelf, because it seems like both myself and Andy are big readers. So Andy, thank you so much, and I'm hoping I'm going to invite you back for our Performance Cafe book club, where we can talk about your book with you and Brad, and get to know a little bit more about, how do we do this? How do we keep the work still human?
Sounds good. I look forward to that. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Andy. So everyone, yet again, we are spoiled by the quality of information and all the sharings that we have this Friday. Thanks so much to Andy. Really appreciated having her on the show. It is such an important message that she's sending out there. And I think even more as the world becomes more and more digitized, not just for us as people at work, but even for us with our families, and how we even raise our young'uns. So if you've enjoyed this episode, which I surely hope you've enjoyed as much as I have, please would you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Performance Cafe. And then, of course, if you are watching us from LinkedIn or from Facebook, please like, subscribe, and comment. And yes, until the next Coffee Companion session, I look forward to seeing you at the Performance Cafe.